11 vessels dropped into the outer solar system with the same absence of warning that the first had shown, that quality of something that had simply decided to exist where it had not existed before. They were not identical to the first vessel, which had been, as the science teams had speculated, essentially an assessment drone. These were different in proportion and geometry, larger in some dimensions and more complex in others, and they carried themselves with the particular patience of things that had never lost a fight. They arranged themselves in a formation that Voss's tactical team spent 11 minutes analyzing, before concluding it had no analog in any human military doctrine, because it was not a formation designed to fight an opponent the fleet's commanders expected to be able to fight back. It was an extermination pattern. Voss looked at the tactical display for exactly as long as it took her to understand this, and then she gave the first order, and the fleet moved. What followed was not a battle in the way that word tends to be used by people who have not been in one. It was a problem, and Voss worked it the way she worked every problem, from the outside in, finding the edges first, and then the shape, and then the place where the shape was weakest. 11 vessels, each carrying a displacement weapon capable of unmaking a ship in a heartbeat, arranged in a pattern that placed their firing arcs in overlapping coverage of every approach vector her fleet could use. Every approach vector, that is, except the ones that ran directly between them, through the overlapping fields of their own weapons, through the gaps their formation had created, by assuming that nothing willing to fight them would be willing to fly directly into the space between 11 alien ships and dare them to fire. Humanity, Voss had concluded some time ago, had a particular relationship with daring things not to fire. It was not a relationship born of recklessness, it was born of arithmetic, the cold calculation of a species that had spent its entire history weighing terrible options against each other and choosing the least terrible with clear eyes. She split the fleet into 4 groups and sent them into the gap simultaneously, deploying tungsten clouds ahead of each formation in dense pre-fractured spreads that turned the space between the alien ships into a suspension of unstable material that no displacement weapon could fire through without clogging itself on the debris. The alien formation, designed for an opponent who would approach from outside, had no answer for opponents who were suddenly inside, moving between them with clouds of gravel that made their primary weapons effectively blind. The alien ships were not helpless. They had secondary systems that Voss's fleet had not encountered before, and 3 of her 31 ships were lost in the first 8 minutes of engagement, not unmade the way the early ships had been, but damaged by physical impact systems that appeared to be the alien equivalent of a last resort, which told her something important about how the alien commanders had expected the engagement to proceed. They had expected, she understood, to unmake everything at range and never need the close-quarter systems at all. The fact that humanity was inside their formation, inside their minimum safe firing distance, was an outcome their entire tactical posture had been designed to make impossible. It was not impossible. Humanity was simply willing to pay a price to make it possible that the alien commanders had not factored into their calculations, because no species the aliens had previously encountered had been willing to pay it. The engagement lasted 47 minutes. When it was over, 9 of the 11 alien vessels had been disabled or destroyed, their displacement gates clogged beyond function, their hulls breached by railgun fire that had by now been refined and concentrated into something far more purposeful than the desperate chain fire Voss had improvised over the bellwether's grave. The remaining 2 broke formation and folded away into wherever they came from, and the solar system was, for the moment, quiet. Voss stood at her console in the half-dark of a bridge that smelled of scorched metal and hard work, and looked at the tactical display for a long time. The 2 that had escaped troubled her more than the 9 that hadn't.